Under the cold glare of Los Angeles twilight, Dylan's reflection in the mirror had become her worst enemy. Every time she caught sight of herself, she saw not her own face but Luna's, those haunted eyes that once danced with light now staring back in accusation. The night Luna died had carved something raw into her soul, something she couldn't wash off no matter how many times she replayed it, reworded it, or tried to tell herself it wasn't her fault. But guilt has a way of outlasting logic. It lingers in the bloodstream like poison, whispering that redemption is impossible. Dylan had stopped sleeping. She had stopped laughing. And even when Electra held her hand, whispering that it was all going to be okay, Dylan's eyes told the truth. She didn't believe that anymore. To Electra, the transformation was terrifying. The girl she once knew, sharp, curious, impulsive, had grown distant, as if she were half alive. There were days Dylan would drift off mid-conversation, staring at something only she could see. Sometimes it was Luna's face in a crowd, sometimes it was the ghost of a father she never knew. Electra began to notice details she had overlooked before: Dylan's posture, the curve of her jaw, the defiant tilt of her chin when she was angry. They reminded her of someone else, someone she had seen countless times in fashion magazines, company press releases, and boardroom news segments. Ridge Forrester. It started as a whisper in Electra's mind, a coincidence she tried to dismiss. But the more she observed, the harder it became to ignore. The similarities between Dylan and the Forrester clan were uncanny, not just in appearance, but in temperament. The creative impulse that bordered on obsession, the perfectionism that made her lose sleep over the smallest mistake, even the way she paced when anxious, it was all too familiar. Electra, ever the pragmatist, knew that the Forresters' world was one of carefully guarded secrets, tangled bloodlines, and buried scandals. And the idea that Dylan might somehow be a hidden branch of that family tree terrified her almost as much as it intrigued her. One evening, after another long silence between them, Electra approached the subject carefully. She suggested Dylan take a DNA test, nothing public, just a private check for health reasons. She framed it as concern over the psychological strain Dylan was under, suggesting that genetic information might help doctors assess mental health predispositions. It was a lie, of course, but a gentle one. Electra wasn't seeking medical truth. She was seeking identity. Dylan hesitated at first, suspicious, but in her fragile state, she clung to anything that felt like control. She agreed. The test was done quietly. No fanfare, no witnesses, just a sterile lab room and the quiet hum of machines. But secrets in Los Angeles are never safe for long. The results were supposed to go directly to Electra, sealed under her name. Yet, as fate would have it, the files slipped through digital cracks, a misplaced email, an auto-forwarded attachment, one human error too many. Within days, the DNA data landed in the inbox of someone who had no business seeing it: Steffi Forrester. Steffi had been reviewing security protocols for Forrester Creations when she stumbled upon the report. At first, it made no sense: a random file with Dylan's name, tagged with the company's medical insurance database. But then she saw the comparison markers, the unmistakable sequences, linking Dylan to Ridge. Her breath caught in her throat. It wasn't possible. And yet the data was irrefutable. She printed it out, her hands shaking, and within hours, the quiet mansion at the top of the hill became a powder keg waiting to ignite. When Ridge saw the paper, he laughed at first, a short, incredulous laugh that masked the tremor in his voice. "There's no way," he said. But denial is always the first reaction when the past comes calling. Eric, already weakened from the stress of the company's leadership battle, demanded an explanation. Brooke, standing nearby, felt the color drain from her face. She remembered, far too clearly, the years when Ridge had disappeared into creative partnerships, flirtations, and impulsive affairs. And suddenly, memory collided with possibility. Could there have been a child he never knew about? The confrontation came like a storm. Ridge called Dylan to Forrester Creations under the pretense of discussing design work. When she arrived, she was met not by opportunity, but by interrogation. The family sat in stunned silence as Ridge placed the DNA results on the table. "Tell me," he said softly, his voice breaking. "Is this true?" Dylan froze. She didn't know how to answer, didn't even know what true meant anymore. Electra, who had accompanied her, stepped forward, trying to take the blame, but the damage was already done. The revelation hit Dylan like a tidal wave. Everything she had believed about herself, her past, her lineage, her place in the world, crumbled in an instant. She wasn't just a broken soul trying to atone for Luna's death. She was a Forrester, a child of the very dynasty she had spent her life admiring from a distance. The name that had always symbolized luxury and power now became a prison. The family that built fashion empires was now a battlefield of loyalties, and she was the newest weapon in their arsenal. Ridge, for his part, was torn between fury and guilt. If the test was true, then he had a daughter who had grown up without him, in a world far removed from the wealth and privilege of the Forresters. And worse, she had suffered, alone and unseen. He wanted to reach out, to claim her, but decades of mistakes chained him to hesitation. Brooke saw the conflict in his eyes, the familiar pattern of Ridge's emotional paralysis, his need to fix things without ever truly facing what caused them. Eric, meanwhile, felt the weight of shame heavier than ever. His family, his legacy, had become a web of deceit that seemed to spawn new scandals with every generation. As the news spread, the Forrester mansion turned into a pressure cooker. Thomas tried to reach out to Dylan, curious yet cautious. Steffi struggled with conflicting emotions, compassion for the young woman who had lost so much, and jealousy over yet another half-sibling threatening her place in the family hierarchy. The press caught wind of whispers about a secret Forrester heir, and though no names were confirmed, speculation ran wild. For Dylan, every headline felt like a fresh wound. She hadn't wanted this. All she wanted was peace, a way to forgive herself for Luna's death. But now she was drowning in the very fame she had never sought. Her connection to Ridge made her a story, a commodity. Reporters dug into her past, unearthing details about Luna's accident, painting her as unstable, reckless, even dangerous. Electra fought fiercely to protect her, but there was only so much love could shield. Ridge's response was predictable yet heartfelt. He tried to bring Dylan into the family fold, offering her a design position at Forrester Creations, a gesture meant as both reparation and control. But Dylan refused. She didn't want their pity or their empire. She wanted her life back, the one she had before her DNA became public property. Her rejection stung Ridge deeply, stirring old insecurities about fatherhood and failure. For a man who built his identity around family, losing his daughter's trust before ever earning it was unbearable. Electra watched helplessly as Dylan spiraled again. The guilt that had once revolved around Luna now intertwined with identity confusion and public scrutiny. Dylan's emotional state became volatile, one moment defiant, the next withdrawn. She began painting again, channeling her turmoil into canvases full of fractured color and abstract grief. Her art caught attention, ironically through the same media that had crucified her, and galleries clamored to display the hidden Forrester's pain. The attention only deepened her resentment. Meanwhile, the revelation fractured the Forresters further. Eric's health deteriorated under stress. Ridge found himself at odds with Brooke over how to handle Dylan, and Steffi grew wary of the family name being dragged through scandal again. But somewhere beneath all the chaos, a strange tenderness began to bloom. Ridge visited Dylan in secret, sitting in silence beside her as she painted. There were no grand speeches, no apologies, just two people trying to understand each other beyond blood and reputation. One night, as the city lights shimmered through her studio window, Dylan finally spoke. She told Ridge about Luna, the guilt, the nightmares, the endless need to atone. She confessed that the only reason she took the DNA test was because she felt lost, and Electra had given her a reason to look for something solid. Ridge listened, his face softening with a kind of pain that only a parent can know. He didn't try to absolve her. He didn't promise miracles. He simply said, You're mine, and that's enough." For the first time, Dylan allowed herself to cry, not for Luna, not for shame, but for the possibility of belonging. Yet belonging comes with a cost. The media frenzy over the Forrester daughter intensified. Reporters stalked her studio, and rumors swirled that Dylan might inherit part of Forrester Creations. Old enemies of the family saw opportunity, and soon legal documents began surfacing, claims, counterclaims, and questions about paternity legitimacy. Brooke, ever protective of her family's legacy, warned Ridge that his desire to protect Dylan could destroy them all. But Ridge refused to deny her. He had spent a lifetime running from accountability. He wouldn't run from this. As winter approached, the chaos began to settle into something quieter, something almost human. Dylan moved out of the city, choosing to live near the ocean, a place that reminded her of Luna and freedom. Electra visited often, their bond deepened not by blood, but by shared endurance. Ridge, too, visited when he could, often arriving unannounced, bearing small gestures, a sketchbook, a scarf, a quiet apology. Each visit ended the same way, with silence and with understanding. In the end, Dylan's story wasn't about scandal or inheritance. It was about the fragile geometry of identity, the way guilt and blood intertwine to shape who we become. She learned that being a Forrester didn't mean perfection or fame. It meant surviving the weight of legacy. And for Ridge, the revelation of her existence forced him to confront the truth that love is not measured by presence, but by the courage to face what you once abandoned. The tabloids would eventually lose interest. The company would recover. The Forresters would return to their endless cycle of beauty, betrayal, and redemption. But for Dylan, peace was something she had to rebuild from the ground up. She would never forget Luna, nor the pain that had brought her here, but she had found something Luna never could, a beginning born from the ashes of confession. And as the waves broke against the shore outside her small coastal home, Dylan finally exhaled. The guilt hadn't vanished, but it had softened. The Forrester blood in her veins no longer felt like a curse. It was simply part of her, proof that even in a world built on secrets and lies, truth can still grow into something resembling grace. The past has a way of waiting, quietly, patiently, until the moment you least expect it to rise again. In Los Angeles, where beauty and memory are both carefully sculpted illusions, Brooke Logan had always believed that some truths could be buried forever. But when the name Dylan began circulating around Forrester Creations, attached to headlines, rumors, and whispers about Ridge's possible connection to another daughter, Brooke felt a chill she hadn't known in years. It wasn't just the gossip that unsettled her. It was the way Dylan's eyes, haunted, resilient, searching, seemed to echo a ghost Brooke thought she had laid to rest decades ago. At first, she dismissed it as coincidence. The Forresters had always attracted complicated women, mysterious pasts, and stray family members suddenly appearing with claims of blood. But something about Dylan was different. Her voice, her posture, her fierce independence combined with that fragile uncertainty. It was like watching history fold in on itself. Every time Brooke saw her across a crowded event or in a photograph, a flicker of memory pulsed behind her eyes. A hospital room, a night of quiet sobbing, and a decision made under the weight of guilt and fear. Back then, the world was simpler, or at least it pretended to be. Ridge had been young, reckless, driven by passion more than reason, and Brooke had been caught between loving him and protecting him from himself. Their relationship had already been scandalous enough. Betrayals, divorces, reconciliations. It was the lifeblood of Forrester drama. But amid all that chaos, there had been one night, one that neither of them ever spoke of again. A night filled not with romance, but with desperation, when Ridge had turned to Brooke after another devastating breakup, and both of them had clung to each other not out of love, but out of the shared illusion of safety. Months later, Brooke realized she was pregnant. She remembered sitting in the doctor's office, the sterile smell of antiseptic stinging her senses, her hands trembling around the ultrasound picture. She told no one, not even Ridge. The world already judged her as manipulative, opportunistic, the woman who could never let Ridge go. Another pregnancy, another scandal. It would have destroyed her career, her reputation, and, she believed, his life. So when Taylor found out, by accident, through a misplaced medical file, it became the secret that tied them together forever. Taylor Hayes had every reason to hate Brooke, but she wasn't cruel. At that time, she was still a doctor before she was a rival, and she recognized the terror in Brooke's eyes. She offered a solution, a clinic contact she trusted, a private arrangement that could ensure the baby would be safely delivered and quietly adopted. Brooke hesitated for days, torn between the instinct to protect and the guilt of deception. But ultimately, fear won. She allowed Taylor to help her orchestrate the adoption, convincing herself that it was for the best. Ridge never knew. The child, she was told, went to a good family. And then, life moved on, at least on the surface. Ridge married, divorced, rebuilt his family. Brooke buried herself in work, then in other men, in reinventions of herself. But that single decision lived at the back of her mind like a splinter beneath the skin, too small to kill her but too deep to remove. Now, standing in front of her vanity years later, Brooke couldn't ignore the resemblance any longer. Dylan's existence, her inexplicable connection to Ridge, her arrival just after Luna's death, all of it reopened wounds that had never really healed. Brooke wasn't the only one haunted by the past. Across town, Taylor sat alone in her office, staring at an old photograph of the Forrester family, tracing Ridge's face with her fingertips. When she first heard Dylan's name in the news, something inside her froze. The years peeled away in an instant, and she was back in that clinic corridor, signing discharge papers under an alias, whispering to the nurse not to ask questions. The secret had been meant to protect everyone. But protection, Taylor had learned, is often just another word for denial. And now, watching the world descend into chaos over the revelation that Dylan might be Ridge's daughter, she realized that silence could destroy more than it ever saved. When Brooke and Taylor met for the first time after the rumors began, the tension between them was no longer about rivalry, it was about shared sin. They avoided eye contact at first, circling one another like ghosts. Finally, it was Brooke who broke the silence, her voice trembling. "You see it too, don't you?" she asked. Taylor nodded slowly, her calm professionalism breaking under the weight of truth. "I hoped I never would," she replied. For days afterward, both women wrestled with what to do. Brooke wanted to tell Ridge immediately, to tear off the bandage, face the pain, and let the truth burn whatever it had to burn. Taylor urged caution, arguing that Dylan was fragile, still reeling from guilt over Luna's death and the sudden media attention. If they told Ridge now, it could destroy her completely. But Brooke countered that keeping quiet was a second betrayal, that Dylan had the right to know who she was, even if the knowledge shattered her. The decision wasn't just moral, it was emotional. Ridge, unaware of the full story, had already begun forming a tentative bond with Dylan, drawn to her instinctively but confused by the depth of that connection. He spoke of her with a mixture of admiration and protectiveness, the way he once spoke of his daughters when they were young. Brooke could see it in his eyes every time Dylan's name came up, a flicker of recognition, as though his heart remembered what his mind couldn't. One evening, Brooke found herself at Forrester Creations long after everyone had gone home. The office was dark except for the faint glow of the city lights spilling through the window. On Ridge's desk lay sketches, Dylan's sketches, she realized, raw and haunting, filled with emotion. As she turned the pages, she saw the same artistic rhythm that Ridge carried in his work, the same precision, the same hunger for perfection. Tears blurred her vision. There was no denying it anymore. The confrontation came sooner than either woman expected. Steffi, suspicious of the whispers between Brooke and Taylor, cornered them during a board meeting. "What are you hiding?" she demanded. Her tone wasn't angry. It was desperate. Steffi had already endured the shock of learning Dylan might be her half-sister through DNA leaks, but now she sensed there was something deeper, darker. Under pressure, Brooke faltered, and in her silence, Taylor's expression gave everything away. Steffi's face turned pale. "You both knew," she whispered. "You knew all along." Once the words were out, there was no containing the storm. Ridge demanded the truth, and Brooke, unable to lie anymore, told him everything: the pregnancy, the adoption, the years of silence. Her confession unfolded slowly, every sentence another piece of her heart torn out. Taylor stood beside her, neither defending nor condemning, simply acknowledging her role in the deception. When Brooke finally finished, Ridge's face was unreadable. He walked away without a word. The aftermath was brutal. Ridge's trust in both women, his lifelong pillars of love and history, crumbled. He refused to see either of them for weeks. Eric, devastated by the revelation that such a secret had been kept from his family, withdrew into himself. Steffi, caught between loyalty and betrayal, lashed out at both women before retreating to protect her own children. But the one who suffered most was Dylan. When she learned the full story, she felt as though her entire life had been stolen from her twice, first by adoption, then by silence. The knowledge that both Brooke and Taylor had played a part in erasing her existence shattered whatever fragile sense of belonging she had built. She fled the Forrester estate that night, leaving only a letter on Ridge's desk. In it, she wrote, "I didn't ask for your name or your legacy. I only wanted to know why no one wanted me to exist." Ridge found her days later at a coastal art studio north of Malibu, where she had been painting feverishly, her canvases exploding with color and rage. When he walked in, she didn't look up. "You came to claim me now?" she asked, her voice flat. "After everyone decided my life was a secret worth keeping?" He didn't answer. He simply stepped closer, his hands trembling. "No," he said finally. "I came because you deserve to hear me say I'm sorry." The silence that followed wasn't forgiveness. It was recognition. Two lives, broken by choices made in fear, finally standing in the same room. Ridge didn't ask her to come home. He didn't promise to make things right. He just told her he loved her, even if too late. In the weeks that followed, Dylan's existence reshaped everything. Brooke and Taylor became pariahs in the Forrester circle for a time, their reputations once again entwined in scandal. Yet beneath the wreckage, something strangely redemptive emerged. Taylor found herself returning to therapy, confronting her guilt rather than rationalizing it. Brooke, for the first time, began to accept that love without truth is just another form of cowardice. The company, predictably, turned the scandal into a spectacle. Whispers of a new Forrester heir drove up publicity. But Ridge refused to let Dylan become a headline. He kept her name off the press releases, defended her privacy fiercely, and in time, the chaos faded into background noise. One evening, months later, Brooke stood outside the Forrester mansion, watching Ridge and Dylan sketch together through the window. They weren't father and daughter in the traditional sense. Too much had been lost, but there was peace in their quiet collaboration. Taylor joined Brooke on the porch, and for a moment, the two women simply watched. "Do you ever think it was worth it?" Brooke asked softly. Taylor hesitated before answering. "I think it had to happen," she said, "for all of us to finally stop pretending." The waves crashed in the distance, the same ocean that had borne so many of their secrets. The past, once buried, had finally spoken, and though it left scars, it also left clarity. Dylan would carry those scars too, but she would also carry truth. And for a family built on beauty and lies, that truth was the rarest form of love they had ever known.